The waitress saw the woman leave without finishing her meal, but what she didn't see was the little paper receipt trembling in the woman's hand as she walked toward the door. She had come into the small neighborhood cafe hungry, exhausted, and hoping that the few crumpled bills in her purse would be enough. They weren't. And when the cashier quietly told her that she was short by $11, she didn't argue, complain, or ask anyone for help. She simply lowered her eyes, whispered an apology, and walked away with tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. What happened next changed more than her afternoon, it changed the lives of 3 strangers forever. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can still change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing stories like this to our community. The woman was named Eloan Hart, 32 years old, with tired green eyes and a coat that had clearly survived more winters than it was designed to. She wasn't homeless, though some days she wondered how close she was to becoming so. She worked as a receptionist at a small dental office across town, but after the clinic reduced her hours, every dollar had become a calculation. Rent came first. Utilities came next. Then groceries, transportation, and the endless collection of small expenses that seemed harmless individually but became mountains when added together. That morning, she had discovered that her bank account had only $12 left. Her next paycheck was still several days away. She had eaten nothing since the previous afternoon, and by lunchtime the hunger had become so sharp that her hands were shaking. She entered the cafe because she remembered it being inexpensive. She chose a simple chicken sandwich, soup, and a glass of water. While she waited, she allowed herself a few minutes to imagine that things were normal. She imagined sitting at a table with someone she loved, laughing about something meaningless, and leaving without worrying whether her card would be declined. But when the meal arrived, she ate slowly, almost reverently, because it was the first hot food she'd had in nearly a day. For 10 minutes, she forgot about the overdue electricity notice sitting inside her purse. She forgot about the landlord's reminder. She forgot about the voicemail from her younger sister saying she couldn't lend her anything because she was struggling too. Then the bill arrived. Eloan counted her money beneath the table. $12. The bill was $23. She checked her phone, hoping perhaps she had forgotten about a few dollars in another account. The screen showed a balance that made her stomach drop. Nothing. She considered washing dishes. She considered asking the waitress if she could pay the rest later. But pride stopped her. She had spent her whole life believing that if she worked hard enough, she would never need to ask a stranger for mercy. Her mother had taught her that dignity wasn't about having money, it was about refusing to let hardship make you cruel. So Eloan placed the $12 beneath the receipt, stood up, and quietly walked toward the door. At a table near the window sat Callum Reed, a 38-year-old single father with his 8-year-old daughter, Maisie. Callum had noticed Eloan earlier because of the way she stared at the food before eating it. It wasn't the look of someone enjoying lunch. It was the look of someone trying to convince herself she deserved it. Callum recognized that look because he had worn it himself years earlier, when his wife had left after a long illness and he suddenly became responsible for raising a child alone while trying to keep his small auto repair business alive. He knew what it meant to count money before ordering. He knew what it meant to smile at a child while silently wondering how the next bill would be paid. Maisie noticed Eloan too. She watched the woman leave with her head lowered, then looked at her father. Callum didn't need her to explain what she had seen. He quietly placed his hand over the receipt on their table, stood up, and walked toward the counter. He asked the cashier about the woman who had just left. The cashier hesitated, then explained that Eloan had been $11 short. Callum reached into his wallet, pulled out $20, and placed it on the counter. He told the cashier to cover Eloan's bill and leave the rest as a tip for the waitress. Then he asked if there was anything else on the receipt that hadn't been paid. The cashier shook her head. Callum looked through the window and saw Eloan walking down the sidewalk, shoulders hunched against the world. He grabbed his coat and hurried outside. Eloan heard footsteps behind her and turned around, immediately wiping her eyes. Callum stopped several feet away so he wouldn't frighten her. He didn't mention the money. He didn't say he had seen her count it. Instead, he simply held out a small paper bag from the cafe. He had gone back inside and asked them to pack another sandwich and a cup of soup. Eloan stared at the bag, confused. Callum told her it wasn't charity. It was simply lunch. Everyone deserved lunch. That sentence broke something inside her. She tried to refuse. She said she couldn't take it. Callum told her that he had a daughter who had once been hungry enough to cry in a grocery store because he couldn't afford the food she wanted. He said another stranger had helped him that day without asking questions, and he had promised himself that whenever he could, he would pass that kindness forward. Eloan finally accepted the bag, but her tears began falling before she could stop them. She thanked him, then asked why he would help someone he didn't know. Callum looked at Maisie, who had followed him outside, and explained that someday his daughter might be the person who needed help. He wanted her to grow up in a world where kindness wasn't something people talked about but something they practiced. Eloan looked at Maisie and smiled through her tears. She said the little girl was lucky to have him. Maisie shook her head and said she was lucky to have both of them because now she had learned that helping someone didn't make you poor. Sometimes it made the whole day richer. The three of them returned to the cafe, but something had changed. Eloan sat down again, this time without shame. Callum and Maisie joined her. They ate together, not because they suddenly became friends, but because sometimes strangers become less strange when they sit at the same table. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed again. Eloan discovered that Callum owned a modest auto repair shop. Business had been difficult, but he treated every customer fairly. He never overcharged elderly drivers and sometimes fixed small problems for free when someone clearly couldn't afford the repair. Eloan began stopping by occasionally to bring coffee or help with paperwork because she had experience with office work. Callum resisted at first, but eventually accepted her help. Then came the unexpected setback. Callum's repair shop was hit by a serious financial problem after a customer disputed a major repair bill. The dispute froze several $1,000s Callum needed to pay suppliers. Without that money, he risked losing the shop. The same shop that had kept food on his daughter's table was suddenly in danger of closing. Eloan learned about it when she arrived one afternoon and found Callum sitting alone at his desk, staring at a stack of unpaid invoices. She remembered the sandwich. She remembered the soup. She remembered the way he had told her that everyone deserved lunch. So she did something he never expected. She used the last of her savings to pay for a professional consultation that helped Callum challenge the disputed charge properly. She also contacted several of the shop's long-standing customers and organized a community repair day. People who had trusted Callum for years began bringing their cars to him. One customer brought an old truck. Another brought a family van. A retired teacher brought the car Callum had repaired for free 2 years earlier. By the end of the day, the shop was filled with work orders. Callum was stunned. He told Eloan she had no business risking her own money when she was struggling herself. She smiled and reminded him that he had once told her kindness wasn't about having extra. It was about remembering what it felt like to have nothing. The community rallied around the shop, but the biggest surprise came a week later when Eloan received a phone call from the dental office. The clinic had expanded and needed someone to manage its administrative operations. Her supervisor recommended her because of the organizational work she had done at Callum's shop. Eloan accepted the position. Her life didn't transform overnight into a perfect fairy tale. She still had bills. She still worried. She still had difficult days. But she was no longer drowning. Callum's business survived too. Months passed, and the cafe became a place where the three of them often met for lunch. Maisie kept a small envelope in her backpack labeled, "Kindness Fund." Whenever she received allowance money, she put some inside. Whenever she saw someone struggling, she wanted to help. One afternoon, Maisie noticed a man standing outside the cafe, staring through the window at the food inside. He looked embarrassed and hungry. She looked at Callum. Callum looked at Eloane. Neither of them said a word. Maisie picked up the kindness envelope and walked toward the counter. Eloane smiled because she finally understood something. Callum hadn't simply bought her lunch that day. He had interrupted a cycle of shame and replaced it with something much stronger. Trust. Hope. And the courage to help someone else. Years later, Eloane would still remember that afternoon. She would remember the $12 in her hand and the humiliation she had felt when she realized they weren't enough. But she would also remember a father who refused to let her walk away believing that being poor for one afternoon made her less worthy of kindness. And Callum would remember something too. He had thought he was only buying a stranger a meal. He never realized he was giving his daughter a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before you go, leave a meaningful comment telling us this: have you ever received a small act of kindness that stayed with you for years? Your story might be exactly what someone in our community needs to hear today. Because sometimes, kindness doesn't look like a grand gesture. Sometimes it looks like $11 placed quietly on a counter. Sometimes it looks like a warm sandwich handed to someone who is too ashamed to ask for help. And sometimes, the smallest kindness becomes the beginning of an entirely different life. Eloane thought she had walked into that cafe needing nothing more than a meal. She walked out carrying something far more valuable, a reminder that difficult seasons do not define our worth, and that when one person chooses compassion instead of judgment, that choice can travel farther than they will ever know. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all: you never truly know how much someone is carrying, so whenever you have the chance to make another person's burden lighter, do it. One day, you may be the person who needs someone else to do the same for you.